All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm your host, Derry Merkins. With me is CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. What's going on, Cody Swan?
Same old, same old. Although you're on the overhead speakers today, so it's a little bit different. You're like coming in from all different angles.
As it should be. I don't have numbers in front of me, but I want to say this is the most popular live stream occurring right now. I can't imagine any other streaming event that would be anywhere near as popular as this one right now.
I mean,
I don't think there's anything going on, right?
The ratings are probably through the roof right now.
What else could people possibly be watching? In lieu of talking anything political, let's go ahead and dive right into our sponsor for this week's episode and for this series of 10 live streams, Country Store Outfitters. You can visit them at countrystore-outfitters.com. They're a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. And we have a winner of the Country Store giveaway, and that is James C. from Atlanta, Georgia, sort of down towards your way. So James, you got Country Store hat and copies of our ebooks heading your way, so enjoy those. And for everyone else who didn't win this week, make sure to sign up for next week's Country Store giveaway. And while you're on our Facebook page signing up for that, make sure to answer our question of the week, which, Cody, what was our question of the week this past week?
What do you use as your primary mobile device? And pretty overwhelmingly, 76% of respondents said an iPhone. So our audience, I guess, tends to skew more hip. Is that the right word? Hip.
Hep.
Is iPhone hip? Is the iPhone hip still?
I think it's so hip it's hep.
I
think that's what the heck cats say. iPhone 60%, huh? No, I wonder if that's going to change.
76%.
76%. Goodness gracious! Yeah. I wonder if that's going to change as prices keep rising on Apple devices. Are they? Do you think they're going to price themselves out?
I think they obviously they could. They really could get themselves become too much of a luxury brand and find too niche market. Model, and so they're of.
Is Cody breaking up for everyone? Just breaking up for me? That's the question. Answer in on Facebook or on Periscope. You might have frozen. Yeah, you might be toast. It'll be interesting to see as prices keep rising. I think the cheapest iPhone XS you can get is over $1,000. So I don't know if that's going to reach a mainstream market, but I guess time will tell. And Cody, I think, is completely gone. So I'll continue this episode on solo until Cody can join back on, if ever. But this week we're talking about a really cool app. It's called Shudi, which everyone can download from the App Store or from Google Play. It's a really cool app where you can post basically two different options. If you're sort of torn between two options, you can post both on Shudi and get friends, family, coworkers, anyone basically to vote on what option you should go with. So I've used it in the past to determine what caffeinated beverage I should drink at any given time, determine what movie I should go see, what kind of pen I should buy. I'm a huge pen nerd, so you can use it for basically anything. And it's a really cool app. Cody could probably talk more about the technology aspect of it, but until he gets back on, I can give sort of a broad overview. We wrote it in React and React Native. So React Native, we've talked about a little bit on the show. It's a really cool framework that you can use to build native mobile applications without having to use the native mobile application languages. So you can build everything with JavaScript using React Native, and it'll compile to native applications. And basically with like the full functionality you would get programming directly for the devices themselves. So it's pretty sweet. We've used it for a couple projects now, Shudi being one of them. And it looks like you're back on. And
okay,
not
that's that Comcast. That's that Comcast love right there.
Didn't Comcast just buy someone? Did they buy like Sky News in the UK or something like that?
Possibly. I would hope they would invest in some better routers or fiber or something, because as much as we're paying them per month, we shouldn't be losing internet connectivity.
Get on that, Comcast. While you're back, what's the question of the week for next week? I was sort of just rambling
Question
about
of the week for
iPhone prices.
That is, that's a good question. That is, should a person have a right to quote, be forgotten on the internet? Because in the EU right now, I think you do
Yeah,
have the right to be forgotten.
that's exactly right.
And
And
so,
the interesting legal aspect of that is it's almost like any new laws that get passed in the EU almost apply immediately globally. So that's why, like, anytime you visit a site now, you have to agree to their cookie policy, even though you're visiting sites from the US. That has nothing to do with us. That has everything to do with the privacy settings that were recently established in the EU. So I think even if the EU somehow established a right to be forgotten, I think that would be pretty applicable worldwide. I don't know how viable that is, though.
well, yeah, I know and that's why I said a right to be forgotten, because there's a big difference between should you be able to and should you have a right to. And what I think most people fail to realize is that all of these regulations have an extremely high cost to them. Like, it's they're aimed at companies like Google and Facebook and stuff like that, but you can't have discriminatory laws, right? So it applies all the way up and down the chain. So mom and pop who have an e-commerce store,
There he goes. Mom and pop who have an e-commerce store. What could be the end of that sentence? Mom and pop who have an e-commerce store probably don't have a right to be forgotten. We don't really care about mom and pop's e-commerce stores.
right? But like, that's what I'm saying. So this law in the EU.
He's
So
back. All right.
if mom and pop create a honey selling e-commerce store, they have to also enable the expensive technology that will allow someone to submit a forget me request, and they have to oblige that. GDPR is expensive to implement, but every site has to implement and so
That's sort of the argument against much of regulation, right? Is that it sort of prices out smaller companies who can't deal with it, or the cost
right.
of
Well,
hiring lawyers and having legal staff on hand to deal with this stuff is so cost prohibitive that you can't even start a business up.
that is generally the problem with regulation, and also even for like bigger companies, it drives their cost up. Not that there's like a cost of using Google or a cost of using Facebook, but it always goes back to reflect, or it always goes back to the consumer in some shape, form, or fashion. That cost is always put back on the consumer, and then
It's tough
consumers
too, though,
about
because on the
hiding.
other hand, with a complete lack of regulation, it becomes easier for bigger firms to get away with stuff. So you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. You got to just kind
Right.
of pick your poison, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And and that's the nexus of the question is
I guess that's the world we live in now. So pick your poison.
another
And do people have a right to be forgotten? That's actually a really good question.
another damned if you do, damned if you don't question from Gunner Technology.
Your weekly damned if you do, damned if you don't question. Yeah, so hop on our Facebook page and answer that and sign up for our country giveaway while you're on there. But let's dive in. I started talking about Should I. Basically, I gave people an overview of what it does, letting you choose between options based on votes from friends, family, coworkers, and anyone who is interested. And I started touching on the technology stack a little bit. I was talking about React Native and what React Native lets you do. But I guess if you want to pick that up and run with it wherever you want, go for it.
So I'm sorry, did you say give an overview of what Should I actually is and all that stuff?
I think people get a gist. Uh, you can, if you're choosing between two things, you can sort of post it and tally votes on either side. And I was talking about how I decided what movie to watch. I decided what pen to buy. I decided what type of caffeine I should consume. Um, and basically anyone can go on there, post anything and vote on anything and sort of help people decide when they're sort of stuck between two good options. So that was my overview of Should I. I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, or two bad options.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Damned if you do and damned if you don't. We should post questions on Should I.
We really should. Actually, we'll start doing that. I'll start doing that for the next week's show.
Yeah.
That's a perfect forum for it. But yeah, exactly right. It's a social application to help you make better decisions, smarter decisions, and depending on who you're followers are. It could be smarter or dumber. So yeah, and so yeah, the technology involved was React Native, and it was one of our first serverless applications. Honestly, and the fact that we've talked about serverless a lot on this show, and the difference is instead of having the other alternative to serverless is letting you have a monolithic application where everything is kind of thrown together. Where in a serverless microservice type application, you have different pieces do different things. And so there's a lot of advantages to it, which I won't go through them all, but that's one of the earlier projects we did as a serverless microservice application. And also it was built right when
I'm gonna finish his sentence because it cut out. Right when
live
Amazon
in the
app
world
sync. Sorry, start
application
over.
that
You
used
said
AppSync. So
right when
it was
you cut
it
out.
was interesting, and
Can't
it
hear
was
me.
frustrating at the same time.
Sorry, you cut out. You started talking about how we started developing the app right when Amazon App Sync was released, and then you completely cut out. Nothing. You got no audio coming your way. This is the best live stream we've ever done. It's episode number, I want to say 42, 41, 42, and we're really locking it down. Maybe I can type. I'll type questions on Instant Messenger if you can't hear me.
I think maybe you're. Hold on. I think maybe
Or
you're
maybe
having internet problems now.
Could people not hear me?
I think I'm connected.
Okay. Okay. No. My audio is definitely coming through on the live stream.
Hold on. Let me drop off, and then I'll join again.
Okay, so while Cody's hopping off and hopping back on, I can talk a little bit about Amazon AppSync. It's a pretty cool new technology that sort of, it does a lot of the dirty work for you, and it's also based on this technology called GraphQL, which is sort of the next generation querying language. So a lot of stuff we built in the past has been on SQL. And GraphQL is basically a way to, we've talked about this before on the podcast too, or the live stream. It's a good way to make requests for exactly the data that you need. So in the past, where you might have had to say you were requesting, using Instagram's API to request an album of photos. So you would request an album that would return 10 photos, and then you might have to request individually for each photo to get additional information. That's a bad example because they actually do return information that you need with each request. But if you can sort of, just as a convoluted example, there might be an API to get photo albums. So you might get a list of photo albums. And then within a photo album itself, there might be an API to request photos for that photo album. So you might have to make 11 requests, one to get a list of albums and 10 requests to get information about each photo. What you can do with GraphQL that's really cool is that you can sort of glom all of this data together in one request. So you can get back exactly what you need. And it's also cool because it sort of integrates with React pretty directly and basically any other component-based framework. So the idea of components is, if you look on, say, like a newspaper website. So a newspaper is sort of laid out. There's articles. There's various articles throughout the page. Each article is sort of its own little chunk of data. Previously, you'd have to sort of request each chunk of data individually as you're building the page out. What's cool about GraphQL is you can sort of just, if you know exactly what chunk of data you need, you can structure your query in such a way that you can get back all of the data you need, the exact data that you need for each component that you're displaying. And the cool thing about component-based development is that if you know exactly what data you're going to need for each component, you can make GraphQL queries for exactly that kind of data, and it's all integrated in sort of like a one-to-one basis. And it looks like Cody's back. So if you want to,
I don't know what that was about. I actually think that was a problem with Google because they kicked me out of the chat, out of our Hangout, and I couldn't get back in. I was online.
You got banned.
But I don't know. It's so funny.
Banned by Sergey Brin.
It's a conservative conspiracy. They don't want to hear my
yeah, that's exactly it. It's probably a Google conspiracy because we're talking so much about React. They don't want the word to get out about Facebook's technology.
That's right, because they back Angular, which is a competing technology, actually.
Yeah.
So
# conspiracy. I think we need to get to the bottom of this. Where's Bob Woodward?
Where is Alex Jones when you need him?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be a great team up? Bob Woodward and Alex Jones getting to the bottom of something.
They get to the bottom of something, all right.
They couldn't even get to the bottom of a bowl of ice cream together.
No. So I have no idea
So
what you're saying about should I, but I'm
you were
sure it
started.
was wonderful.
I was just talking about React Native and GraphQL and how Amazon AppSync sort of allows you to quickly build and prototype mobile applications.
Yeah, AppSync is, and as I was saying before, I don't know if I got cut out. We were one of the first companies to have a production app in the world using AppSync. So it was one of those things where it was touch and go, where it's a great technology, but whenever you're using bleeding edge and you're the first people moving forward with it, it's always kind of trial by fire because you don't have that open source community that has figured out all the sticking points ahead of you. So, but it's a hodgepodge of technologies that kind of brings together VLT, velocity templates, DynamoDB, Elasticsearch, Lambda API gateway. It's basically a wrapper. It's like a PaaS, platform as a service, around a lot of other AWS services. And then we also integrated Amplify, AWS Amplify with that, which provided other niceties, including analytics, so you can see who's using the application, who's doing what with the application, and something called Cognito, which Cognito is AWS's like sign-in solution. It allows apps to take advantage of kind of any provider, meaning you can log in with Facebook, you can log in with Amazon, you can log in with Google, you can log in with a username and password, you can log in with a phone number and password. It's basically a login solution that provides access to AWS solutions and kind of acts as a gateway to what the user can access via the application.
How can people get started using AWS or Amazon AppSync? Is it sort of freely available and you can just spin up an
Now it
account and
is.
sort of get rolling?
Now it is. We were in part of the private beta program, but yeah, now you can just go to AWS, and if you have an AWS account, you can just get started with AppSync right away. And I think I heard you talking about it, but the big boon for AppSync is that it uses GraphQL, which is just such a great evolution of the REST-based API. And they used another open source technology called Apollo to kind of wrap that up, make it bring it all together, kind of thing.
So talk about I talk about Cognito for a little bit because uh, sort of managing user data is has historically been one of the major headaches for software development. So what does Amazon accomplish with Cognito?
So Cognito is basically a wrapper service around a number of other like kind of technologies like OAuth, LDAP, Active Directory, and so basically it just acts as a gateway that basically says that uses technology to identify someone. So if you say I am Cody Swan, Cognito basically is a way for the app to verify that you really are Cody Swan. So there's that portion of it. Then also Cognito can control what Cody Swan can actually do. And Cognito does that by using another AWS technology called IAM. And so basically each IAM instance, and this can be a role, it can be a user, it can be a group, has certain permissions. So for example, read data from a database. So Cognito knows that I am Cody Swan. And then so it checks to see what Cody Swan can and cannot do and prevents Cody Swan from doing anything he shouldn't be allowed to do.
What's the stack look like for Should I? Is it sort of a traditional stack or is it serverless?
So this is serverless, and it was one of our first serverless applications actually, and that made it a lot easier to work on because there were certain components of it that we did in parallel work. So there was obviously the main application, but there was also a lot of stuff that happens in the background with the voting, the push notifications. And so each of those things are different services, meaning they're entirely separate. We talk about it as one application, but each of these services really serves as a single application, and they just come together to form a bigger application. So all these different parts made up individual applications, and they're just tied together through things like Cognito and GraphQL.
That's actually a good opportunity to talk about sort of microservices and sort of the new way of developing applications, which is sort of there might be one sort of application and name that is actually built out of, tens or I mean, in some cases, even hundreds of sort of microservices that run individually and sort of have one task that they do. So they're an application. They're sort of a pseudo application or micro application or microservice. So maybe talk about those and talk about Lambda and how that all fits together.
Yeah, so microservices are interesting because they really fit the immutable paradigm of programming. So immutable basically says that given given the same input, the function will produce the same output. So basically, if you have a function that adds two numbers together, no matter what two numbers if you give it 2 and 1 and they add it, it's going to be 3 every time. You're not going to put 2 and 1 in the box and get out 4 sometimes, which sounds pretty straightforward, but that's not how a lot of programming works. A lot of programming will have what's called state mixed in with functions. So things like time of day will be baked into the function, and the output will change based on the time of day that is inside the function, not what is actually passed to the function. So much as that works for functions, this also works for services or applications. So basically, let's say in the case of Shudi, you have a post, like someone creates a new Shudi, we call it a post. A lot of things happen to that post. It's inserted into the database. It's broadcast via push notification. It creates alerts. So a number of different things. And so that post passes through many different services. And the services don't change the post. They just act upon the post and then pass it to the next service, for example. So they're all independent, and it doesn't matter what one service does with the post, just as long as it passes the post to the next service. So we could add another service that said that maybe like syndicates the post to Facebook. Well, we're not changing an existing application. We're actually going to create another small application that posts the should I post to Facebook, and then just pass the should I on to the next service or function or application. This is kind of like what they talk about with modular design, where you can just take pieces in and out, and it doesn't affect the overall application. It just affects features of the application.
Yeah, it's almost like an assembly line process where each microservice has its own one responsibility to do.
Right. It
And
does one thing. It does one thing, and then it passes. The only difference is on an assembly line, the product is changed every step down the assembly line.
right. Yep. That's
With
a good
microservices,
point.
it's the same thing. It's like if like it was like an assembly line where it was already finished, and like you had a photographer take a picture of it, and then a videographer take a video of it, and then someone else posted the video online of it, and so nothing ever changes. You're just doing something with the final product and passing it down the line.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Kind of. That's a fun, kind of a funny
Kind of.
analogy. Um, we actually have a question on Periscope, which is how many companies build websites this way as opposed to the other way? Which I guess the other way they mean sort of the
Monolithic.
one monolithic application that does everything.
Yeah, well, there's no way to know for certain
That's
because
from
again,
Chica
to the
4891, by the way. Shout out to
what's
Chica 4891.
Well, it's tough to say because to the end user, you don't really know. The benefits of serverless are generally in the development process and the maintenance process, where bugs are easier to find, bugs are easier to fix. It's easier to develop new features. It's quicker to develop new features. But to the end user, it should all look the same. So it's pretty tough to tell how an application is built if you're just looking at it. Um, Research says that the serverless approach is really picking up steam, not only because of that, but they're also significantly cheaper to
Yeah.
build.
I was gonna ask about the cost. The cost must be substantially lower when you can sort of spin stuff up on demand and basically
Right,
handle any level of demand that you might see. You get a
right.
write-up in TechCrunch or something, and you get that. TechCrunch isn't really where people get it written up anymore. What's there used to be the TechCrunch bump. What's the contemporary TechCrunch bump?
Reddit, Hacker News.
Yeah, that's good. The Reddit bump. So
Yeah,
you can handle those massive spikes in traffic a lot easier with a modular design, a serverless design. And it
right.
costs, and the cost benefit is substantial because you're sort of not paying for stuff running when you don't need to use it.
Right. That's the big thing is like because in serverless microservices, again, nothing should change the object that passes through it. You can have zero or infinite, and all they're doing is passing through the data. None of them are changing it, so they can act on it in parallel. So you can have, like I said, the one you can have the Facebook service, which takes care of posting should I to Facebook, and it's going to act on one should I post. But if there's a billion posts should I post at one time, it can scale out to a billion instances of that service and send all the posts through to Facebook without any problem. And then after it's done, all those billions of services disappear. So literally, you just have you have something sitting there waiting for requests to come in, and it handles its responsibility, and then it basically just goes back to sleep. So unlike a monolith service, where in order to handle one part of the application, the whole application needs to be running. So even if you're just posting something to Facebook, the application that does everything has to be running at all times. And so if the Facebook portion of that has to scale, then the entire application has to scale. So you can't just scale pieces of it. You have to scale the whole thing or nothing at all.
Was that Facebook's sort of primary reason for going with components and serverless stack as opposed to sort of the traditional stack because they were tipping over when major bombshell events would happen?
Well, so the Facebook got into React because the traditional DOM was too slow. And so basically, for the non-technical users out there, the DOM is basically what you see on a screen on a web page. It's what you see. It's called the document object model, and it's what you actually see on the screen. So when things update, as you're sitting there and you're looking at Facebook, say for example, someone could be commenting and you see a bubble come up and it starts commenting. You see post count change. You see new post count. You see a new post come in. That's all. That's all manipulating the DOM, and so much of it was going on that it got really slow, and people's screens would freeze because there was so much manipulating the DOM. So what React did is basically it creates a virtual DOM, and what it does very quickly is it updates the virtual DOM, something you don't actually see, and then overwrites the real DOM with the virtual DOM really quickly, which sounds kind of weird, but if you do it the right way where you can diff it, and again, the internals of React are very complex, above my pay grade. But what happens is you can make updates to that virtual DOM and then apply it to the real DOM. So yes, in terms of the componentization of React, that was where Facebook started to really look into it, because they went from being a full page to building components. So everything you see on Facebook is like a component. So a poll is a component, an icon is a component, and then you can worry about updating just that component rather than the entire document at the same time.
Which makes pages way more responsive. I guess that's sort of
Right,
like the
exactly.
new feel of pages is that they're sort of you get immediate feedback on whatever you do, which I guess makes them a bit stickier.
Right. I mean, if you look at study after study, the thing that's like an instant bail is a slow, unresponsive website or app. No matter, like we talk about this all the time, like people are willing to forgive bugs. They're willing to even kind of spend a little bit of time to figure out how to use a new application. But if it's slow, they are bailing instantly.
Yeah. So I guess speed is sort of the name of the game right now in today's application economy, which is interesting. I guess it makes sense. It's kind of funny coming from I guess coming from my initial usage being on 56K dial up. I I've always been a little bit more patient with slow websites, but I guess today's generation, these damn kids, they just
Oh
won't
yeah,
take it.
instant. I mean, yeah, I would start up the Prodigy connection and then go do like 50 other things and come back in like an hour.
Yeah, and it would almost be ready to use.
Yeah, yeah,
So what's the future of Should I? Talk about sort of next steps, additional features. Seems like there'd be a good marketing angle here if you could have companies ask whether you should go with, gosh, I don't know, uh, standard Oreos or what's the really good birthday cake Oreos? Ever
yes,
have birthday cake
yes.
Oreos or lemon Oreos? Those are amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have actually development on Should I is going to resume October 1st, so just around the corner. And we do have some pretty neat features that kind of will be coming out, and also some optimizations as well, just to make it more streamlined, to make it more sticky, to kind of move toward that monetization angle. It's a free app. It's 100% free. There's no advertising, and the app doesn't share your data with anyone. And so we've noodled over exactly what you're saying is how do we, at some point, Should I is going to have to make money. So how do we get it to the point where it's making money, but it's not selling your data to advertisers? It's not, it costs money to download. There's no subscription fee. And so, yeah, one of those things is to have kind of products that the users would be interested in, that kind of presents like a Subway can post, do you want ham or turkey? And so, for
Yeah,
example, and then send you a coupon for voting kind of thing. The thing that always gets interesting, and this is always a sticking point with social apps, is because Facebook, as they've said, they don't really sell your data to advertisers. What they do is they allow advertisers to reach people who would be interested in their product. So what I just said, using this example of Subway, well, that might be very interesting to Subway to pay for that placement and to be able to put that poll. What they would really want to do is show that poll to people who are likely to like Subway. And the only way you can do that is by allowing them to say, show this ad to people who like Subway. And then at the point that you do that, you are doing what Facebook has been doing, which is kind of opening your psychograph to advertisers.
which I'm not sure anyone really wants to do that anymore.
I know. So
Although,
and no one wants to pay for an application either. So it's one of those things where it's it's a problem, and people problems are there to be solved, but it's something that doesn't have a great solution as of yet, and we're hoping to come up with one.
gosh, I wonder if there's going to be sort of a turn to paying a monthly subscription fee just so that your data isn't analyzed and converted into like a psychological profile so that ads can be targeted at you aggressively. I wonder if there's going to be what would it take? This is sort of off topic, and we'll sort of end with this because we're running a bit over. But what would it take, do you think, for people to make that change? Is it going to take another Cambridge Analytica type blowout, or are people just going to get fed up with their data being everywhere and sort of being utilized by these companies to line their pockets with targeted advertising? What do you see as the future of, I guess, financial viability of applications without resorting to the standard methodology of soaking up as much user data as you possibly can and then selling it to the highest bidder?
Okay, yeah, I have a great answer for that actually. Not to toot my own horn, but I will a little bit because I have
Trump
a
your own toot.
during my MBA program, one of the earliest guys from Apple, I mean, early days, came in and he spoke. And basically, he said that if you go back to the time when iTunes was first coming out, you could go, I think Napster was still around. There was certainly that other LimeWire was definitely still around. You could get songs for free pretty easily, but there was risk involved. Would it have a virus? People were a little bit concerned if it's illegal, but not
I
really.
your ISP would flag you and you would lose internet access.
Right. And then like once you downloaded it, organizing it was tough. Like where was it? All that stuff. So Steve Jobs, this is the story. Steve Jobs actually came to, like, was basically like, we should have a service that allows songs to be downloaded, and we provide great quality sound, because that's the other thing, is quality wasn't always great on LimeWire and stuff like that. Great quality and great experience around the song. Like it goes to different devices. It's easily organized. There's information about the song, all that stuff.
You could recommend related songs that you might like based on.
Yeah, exactly. And someone was like, well, how do we, and what Steve Jobs came up with was, again, all songs at first were 99 cents. He basically, off the top of his head, was like, I think that's worth about 99 cents per song to people. And he nailed it. And now, since they've gotten more expensive, and also since then, you've had competing services like Spotify and Pandora that have kind of cut into that share. But it's about finding the right price point, something where people will be like, you know what? Yeah, that's worth it. It's not a lot of money, and I enjoy the niceties of this product or service that I'm willing to pay that little bit amount of money and kind of not bat an eye about it.
So find a price point and provide a sufficiently beneficial service that people will be willing to pay for it.
And then slowly raise the price. No, seriously. I mean,
and then like, rapidly raise the price.
It's a frog sitting in the boiling water type thing. I mean, Netflix is doing the same thing right now. They're slowly raising the price. And good on them. They should, because they provide an excellent service and they should be compensated for that. But again, you have to find a price point that will let people get in, get used to the service, really start enjoying the service, and then they don't mind $1 increase in price a month. They're like, okay, that's fine, whatever. It's worth it to me.
It's interesting because that really is a talent, finding that price point, because you look at something like MoviePass, where I think when I first started using MoviePass, it was $40 a month for unlimited movies, and that became $30 to try and get more subscribers, and that became $10, which is an absolute disaster for the company. And so then they went from unlimited to 3 movies a month, and it seems like they're just floundering trying to figure out what the price is. Whereas if they had just figured out the price point at the get-go and gotten all these people to sign up, then they could slowly raise the price and build the user base. But they've sort of ruined the reputation to the point that nobody feels confident using it anymore. So I guess that's just like, that's why Steve Jobs was Steve Jobs, is that he immediately knew what the price point would be.
Yeah, that was one thing that Steve Jobs did really, really well. He understood,
except for the original
Next operating system,
or I was going to say the original Mac. I think was cost prohibitive to the point that nobody bought it.
Right. So
yeah, I guess he got better.
Yeah, the thing he got better at was he understood consumers very well. I mean, that doesn't mean to say he missed a couple times, but he understood consumers very well. That's why still their Mac, all their systems are closed systems. Like Lenovo can't build a Mac and ship it. The hardware and the software is built by Apple, because he understood that people want a seamless system. They want one experience, and that's the Apple experience. That's the experience that Apple provides. It's not perfect, but if something breaks, it's Apple's fault. Apple is going to be responsible for fixing it, kind of thing. And also, when you're not integrating other people's stuff, you really know it a lot better, and it can generally perform much better. And to your point, when we started the show, is I think without Steve Jobs, one of the things without Steve Jobs they really lost touch on is that price point.
Yeah. To bring it full circle, I think the iPhone is creeping up to the point that it's prohibitively expensive, and people might start making the switch in bigger numbers. I think we're already seeing it. I think Android is taking an ever increasing percentage of market share. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. But that is fun, bringing it full circle. So we'll end it there. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to join us next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Hop on our Facebook page to sign up for the Country Store giveaway. Country Store is a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. And while you're on our Facebook page, you can answer our question of the week, which is next week. What is the question, Cody?
Should a person have the right to be forgotten on the internet?
And you can also hop on Should I, which is an app that anyone can download to answer that question. We're going to start posting questions of the week on Should I. So feel free to download Should I, test it out. Send us your feedback, any features you want to see added. And you can check out the podcast for this episode on iTunes. Check out our ebooks on Barnes & Noble, Kobo, iBooks, Amazon, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. The blog post for this episode will be on gunnertech.com. I don't think I missed anything, but if I did, apologies. But make sure to tune in next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.